Good afternoon and good morning, ladies and gentlemen around the globe. Welcome to the 2021 STEPI Global Symposium. I'm Ji-young Yoo, Associate Research Fellow at Science and Technology Policy Institute in Korea. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you today to our annual symposium. This year, we are especially featuring the theme called Global STI for Resilient and Sustainable System in the Post-COVID Era. This symposium aims to bring together international experts to share their research and insights on the topic of rebuilding public trust in science and vision for global cooperation in science and technology. Now, without further ado, let us begin with the welcoming ceremony. First, I would like to invite Dr. Miyuk Moon, President of Science and Technology Policy Institute, for her opening remarks. Please welcome Dr. Moon to the podium.
네, 안녕하십니까. 과학기술정책연구원장 문미옥입니다. 오늘 2021년 스테피 글로벌 심포지움에 오신 그리고 참석하고 계신 여러분 모두를 환영합니다. 오늘 축사를 해주실 경제인문사회연구회의 정혜구 이사장님, 그리고 직접 거름해 주신 국가과학기술연구회의 김복철 이사장님께 특별한 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 오늘 이 자리에서 귀중한 논의의 장을 열어주실 게이오 대학의 지로 코쿠료 교수님, 그리고 페르난다 베이헬 유네스코 오픈사이언스 자문위원회 위원장님, OECD 선임 이코노미스트인 마리오 세르반테스 박사님, 마르타 페레즈 꾸소 UN 아시아 태평양 경제사회위원회 기술혁신부 경제 담당관님, 그리고 자장과 토론으로 우리의 생각을 정리하고 이끌어 가주실 서울대학교의 이현숙 교수님과 과학기술정책연구원의 장영석 박사님, 카이스트의 과학기술정책대학원의 박범순 교수님, 그리고 외교안보연구소의 오영주 소장님, 그리고 우리 연구원의 박환일, 박찬수 두 본부장님들께도 감사드립니다. 그리고 특히 오늘 여러 가지 제약에도 불구하고 우리 과학기술정책연구원의 글로벌 심포지움과 오늘의 주제에 관심을 가지고 현장과 온라인으로 참석해 주시는 여러분들께 진심으로 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 지금까지 13회째 개최하고 있습니다. 스테피 글로벌 심포지움은 올해 주제를 코비드-19 이후에 회복력 있고 지속가능한 시스템을 위한 글로벌 과학기술 혁신으로 정하고 여러 전문가들과 논의의 시간을 갖고자 합니다. 모두 아시겠지만 코로나 위기를 맞으면서 우리는 공급망 위기, 의료, 공중보건 등 우리 사회 주요 시스템들이 얼마나 취약한지를 절실히 깨닫게 되는 계기가 되었습니다. 많은 사람들이 앞으로도 이런 위기에도 올 이런 위기에도 잘 회복할 수 있는 그런 사회가 되어야 한다고 얘기하지만 사실 회복력 있는 사회를 어떻게 구축해야 할지를 정확히 아는 사람은 드문 것 같습니다. 회복력은 변화하는 환경에서 스트레스를 흡수하고 또 중요한 기능을 회복해 성과로 연결하는 사회의 역량을 의미하겠습니다. 세계가 더 역동적으로 변하고 예측 불가능해지면서 회복력의 중요성은 더 커지고 있습니다. 이번 코로나 사태가 일회성 이벤트가 아닐 것이라고 예측하고 있습니다. 과거 우리가 겪었던 사스, 그리고 메르스, 에볼라 바이러스와 같은 사태는 향후 피할 수 없는 세계적인 감염병 대유행을 미리 경고했었고 또 앞으로도 다가올 미래에 비슷한 상황들이 발생할 수 있을 것입니다. 사이버 바이러스의 확산과 기후변화나 사회적 갈등으로부터 야기될 수 있는 경제 사회 불안정 또한 앞으로 일어나지 않을 거라고 누구도 장담할 수 없는 그런 상황입니다. 코로나 바이러스뿐만 아니라 전 지구적인 위기, 불평등의 심화, 자연고갈과 기후변화 문제와 같은 위기를 유발할 수 있는 이슈들이 우리 앞에 지금 당장 와 있습니다. 이런 가운데서 우리가 지향해야 할 포스트 코로나 시대는 단순히 이전의 상태로 돌아가는 회복이 아니라 다양한 위험 요소들에 대해서 빠르게 대응하고 중요한 기능을 회복해 위기 상황을 최소화하고 기회를 새롭게 만들어갈 수 있는 회복력으로 지속 가능한 사회를 향해야 할 것입니다. 이러한 회복력 있고 지속 가능한 사회와 시스템을 만들기 위한 글로벌 과학기술 혁신의 과제를 오늘 저희는 과학에 대한 대중의 신뢰 회복과 과학기술 글로벌 협력의 강화 두 가지로 나누어 논의해 보고자 합니다. 우리가 겪고 있는 다양한 글로벌 난제에도 불구하고 우리는 이번 위기 극복을 위해 빠른 백신 개발과 디지털 경제 활동을 뒷받침하는 다양한 기술 개발과 시스템 혁신으로 과학기술의 중요성을 확인할 수 있었습니다. 이처럼 과학기술의 발전은 우리 인류가 직면한 다양한 이슈들을 극복하는 데 큰 역할을 했습니다. 그렇지만 한편으로 백신에 대한 불신, 그리고 가짜뉴스, 양극화 문제, 인권, 윤리와 같은 측면에서 우리 국민들이 또 대중들이 편견과 우려를 제기하고 있는 것도 사실입니다. 일례로 지난 6월에 실시한 대통령 직속 4차 산업혁명위원회의 AI 대중화를 위한 대국민 인공지능 이용 인식조사에서 우리나라 국민 중 40%만이 AI를 신뢰한다고 응답한 것을 기억하실 것입니다. AI 기술에 대한 불신의 이유로는 부정확한 데이터에 의한 피해 발생이나 프라이버시 문제, 윤리적 가치 판단 미반영으로 인한 인권 침해, 그리고 일자리 영역의 침해 등을 꼽았습니다. 기술에 대한 기대도 있지만 또 우려도 상존한다는 것을 알 수 있었습니다. 여기서 알 수 있듯이 우리가 과학기술이 경제사회 문제를 해결하고 공공의 이익을 위해서 활용하려면 무엇보다도 대중의 신뢰와 다자 간의 협력이 뒷받침되어야 할 것입니다. 고도의 전문성에 기반한 과학기술계와 같이 정보가 통제된 폐쇄적 생태계에서는 연구 데이터에 대한 접근이 어렵고 상호 이해관계를 구축하는 것도 쉽지 않기 때문에 과학과 사회 간의 신뢰 프로세스를 만드는 것도 매우 중요할 것입니다. 이와 같이 과학 발전에 장애가 되는 대중의 신뢰 회복의 이슈와 협력 증진을 위해서 우리 과학기술계는 지속적으로 노력해왔고 앞으로도 그 노력은 더 강화되어야 할 것입니다. 며칠 전 11월 24일 프랑스 파리에서 열린 제41차 유네스코 총회에서 193개 회원국의 만장일치로 AI 윤리 권고와 오픈 사이언스 권고가 채택되었습니다. 두 권고는 과학기술에 대한 윤리적 접근과 공동의 이익 추구를 기반으로 하고 있습니다. 두 권고에서 공통적으로 제안하고 있는 원칙은 투명성과 지속가능성 그리고 협력입니다. 오늘 우리 심포지엄에서 다루는 과학에 대한 대중의 신뢰와 과학기술 글로벌 협력과도 밀접한 연관이 있다고 하겠습니다. 이러한 연구 데이터의 개방화 추세와 함께 전 세계의 연구자 및 산업계, 학계, 공공부문, 이해관계자들 간의 협력 활동과 공동 연구가 이전보다 증가하고 있으며 협력 방식도 다양해지고 있습니다. 특히 이번 코로나가 장기화되면서 지속가능한 사회 시스템을 구축하기 위해서 과학기술과 사회 문제 해결이 지구촌 모두의 노력으로 함께 이루어져야 한다는 것을 다시 한번 상기하는 계기가 되었습니다. 그러면서도 한편으로 미중 기술 갈등, 글로벌 가치 사슬의 재편으로 인한 자국 우선주의의 확대도 일어나고 있습니다. 이에 대한 우려의 목소리가 나오고 있고 그럼에도 불구하고 포스트 코로나 시대의 글로벌 과학기술 혁신 협력은 글로벌 공공재로서의 과학기술의 중요성에 대한 이해를 바탕으로 해서 지속가능 발전을 위한 국제협력을 도모해야 된다는 점이 누구도 이견이 없을 거라 생각을 합니다. 코로나가 바꿔놓은 우리 일상이 어떻게 전개될지 예측하기 어렵습니다. 그렇지만 그 이후의 삶과 사회의 모습을 논의하고 준비하는 것이야말로 회복력 있고 지속 가능한 시스템을 향한 시작이 아닐까 합니다. 오늘 2021년 스테피 글로벌 심포지엄에서 국내 전문가 여러분들의 다양한 관점들이 논의되어 국경 없는 협력과 대중의 신뢰 기반의 과학기술 혁신을 통한 지속 가능한 시스템 구축에 일조하게 되기를 바랍니다. 오늘 참석하신 발표자와 참석자 여러분 그리고 이 자리를 준비해 주신 우리 연구원의 담당자 여러분의 수고에 다시 한번 감사를 드립니다. 고맙습니다.
Thank you, Dr. Moon, for your encouraging message. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Haegu Jung, Chairperson of National Research Council for Economics, Humanities, and Social Sciences Korea, who has prepared us with a video of his congratulatory remarks. Please welcome Dr. Jung.
여러분 안녕하십니까? 경제인문사회연구회 이사장 정혜구입니다. 먼저 2021 과학기술정책연구원 글로벌 심포지엄 개최를 진심으로 축하드리며 오늘 이 귀중한 자리를 마련해 주신 과학기술정책연구원 문미욱 원장님과 관계자 여러분들에게 깊은 감사의 인사를 드립니다. 코로나19 위기로부터의 회복이 위드 코로나가 될지 포스트 코로나가 될지는 아직 분명치 않지만 그럼에도 코로나19 이후의 시대가 과거와는 매우 다른 시대가 될 것임은 분명합니다. 더구나 코로나19 이후의 상황은 디지털 전환과 그림 전환, 그리고 국제질서 변동의 시대적 변화와 함께 할 것이기 때문에 코로나19 이후의 시대는 그 이전의 시대와 크게 다를 것입니다. 오늘 심포지엄의 주제는 코비드19 이후 회복력 있고 지속 가능한 시스템을 위한 글로벌 과학기술 혁신입니다. 코로나19 이후 도래할 새로운 상황에서 회복력과 지속 가능성을 갖춘 사회와 세계를 구축하기 위해 글로벌 차원에서 과학기술 혁신이 어떠한 역할을 수행해야 할 것인지가 오늘 심포지엄의 중심적인 문제의식인 것입니다. 코로나19 이후의 시대, 디지털 전환과 그린 전환의 시대가 과학기술 혁신의 시대가 되리라는 점은 충분히 짐작되는 바입니다. 더구나 세계적인 패권 경쟁에서 과학기술에 대한 국가적 이해가 매우 큰 현실에서 과학기술 혁신에 대한 관심은 그 어느 때보다도 큽니다. 문제는 과학기술 혁신이 제대로 이루어지면서도 그것이 수반할 수 있는 부정적 측면을 줄이는 한편 그것이 특정 국가나 집단의 과도한 이익에 기여하는 것이 아니라 사회와 인류 전체의 공익에 봉사하도록 해야 한다는 점입니다. 우선 4차 산업혁명 등 과학기술 혁신이 급속히 이루어지고 있는 상황에서 그것이 가져올 긍정적인 측면만이 일방적으로 강조되는 경향이 있습니다. 그러나 과학기술 혁신이 초래할 부정적인 측면 또한 무시되어서는 안 될 것입니다. 따라서 위험성과 부작용 등 그 부정적인 측면을 제어할 수 있는 투명한 연구 과정과 윤리, 그리고 사회적 감시 등이 필요하지 않은가 합니다. 급속한 과학기술 혁신에 따른 또 하나의 우려는 그것이 가져올 이익이 특정 국가나 집단에 편중되는 것입니다. 그럴 경우 그것은 세계적 사회적 불평등으로 이어질 가능성이 매우 큽니다. 물론 과학기술 개발에 대해서는 그 적정한 대가가 주어져야 할 것입니다. 하지만 과학기술 혁신 자체는 사회적, 세계적 공공재로서 간주될 필요가 있습니다. 그래야만 과학기술 혁신은 범사회적, 범지구적 문제들을 해결할 수 있는 중요한 수단이 될 수 있을 것입니다. 다른 한편 과학기술 혁신의 긍정적, 부정적 효과에 대한 부정확한 정보는 과학기술 발전에 대한 신뢰를 약화시킬 수 있습니다. 따라서 과학기술 혁신에 대한 정확한 정보 전달의 필요성은 매우 큽니다. 오늘 심포지엄에서는 이상과 같은 문제들이 심도 깊게 논의될 수 있기를 바랍니다. 오늘 심포지엄 발표자와 토론자 여러분과 참가자 여러분들에게 다시 한번 깊은 감사를 드립니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. Now we will have another congratulatory remarks from Dr. Bok-cheol Kim, Chairperson of National Research Council of Science and Technology Korea. Please welcome Dr. Kim to the podium.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am so delighted to have a congratulatory remark in the opening of 2021 STEPI Global Symposium. I want to thank the President Miyuk of STEPI for Global Symposium. I want to thank the valuable opportunity and experts from various fields of participating in today's event. The theme of this symposium and the topic of the sessions give us a moment to think where we are, So we are now facing a common crisis, COVID-19. The global consequences brought by this pandemic are predicted to be far more serious and problem than we could have expected. The COVID-19 pandemic presents us with just such an example of the relationship between science and society. Simply speaking, a scientific endeavor that is not trusted by the public cannot adequately contribute to society and will be diminished as a result. Although newly developed vaccines were remarkable accomplishment on its own, manufacturing and delivering these vaccines to the world's population had been an enormous challenge. To further complicate this situation, a public that is generally trusting of scientists and health professionals is receiving vastly different information, guidance, and recommendation, and based on its news consumption, political leaders, and the geography. The science of vaccine development cannot be successful if it is not trusted enough that people will get vaccinated. So science will have accomplished nothing by producing a vaccine that sits unused in a warehouse. So we cannot become resigned or complacent as we work to maintain trust in science during this critical moment. NST and the Korean government have made various efforts to build the public trust in science. The science direct and transparent communication between scientists and the public is getting more important. NST launched Science and Technology Communication Alliance with the Korea Foundation for the Advancement of Science and Creativity and Korea Federation of Science and Technology Societies, and etc. It encourages communication between the public and researchers in GRIs. Here is GRI means Government-Funded Research Institute, and university and industries. Also, NST tries to build trust in science by sharing the correct information through lectures and communications program and by publicizing scientists' effort to address the national agenda. I think in this moment where everything is uncertain, the cooperation of the international community based on the scientific mind is very crucial. To combat the virus, we need to share information and rely on the strengths of our networks. Rather than retreating into isolation, we have to move forward towards global access and solidarity. NST has sought ways for its GRIs to be relationship actors in the international community by actively joining in global effort to address global challenges. As an example, NST is going to start a new international program next year. It is specifically designed to utilize GRI's overseas organization and to support Global Agenda Research Lab through cooperative endeavors with excellent foreign institutes. I recognize that this symposium will play a key role in promoting future STI cooperation in this era of knowledge-intensive collaborating society. So I'm confident that Symposium will build a step to rebuild the public trust in science and to strengthen the global cooperation. With this in mind, I very much look forward to your discussions and exchange of views of today's symposium. National Research Council of Science and Technology will also commit ourselves to working with the relevant research institute by reflecting the ideas discussed at 2021 STEPI Global Symposium to be prepared for the post-COVID-19 era. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim, for your kind remarks. Now we would like to have a 5-minute break before we proceed to the first session. Please stay with us as we will resume shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin with Session 1, Rebuilding Public Trust in Science. We are grateful to have Professor Hyun-Suk Lee from Seoul National University, also Head of Research, as chair of this session. Please welcome Professor Lee to the floor.
Welcome to Session 1, Rebuilding Public Trust in Science. We have 2 speakers in this wonderful session. The first speaker is from Keio University, Japan, Professor Jiro Kokuryo. Professor Jiro Kokuryo graduated from University of Tokyo in 1982, and he actually was an employee in Nippon Telegraph and Telephone Corporation between 1982 to 93. He received MBA and DBA, both from Harvard Business School. Now he's serving in Keio University. He had been serving as the dean from 2009 to 2013. He also served as a vice president. So with all his experiences, he is going to give a talk on AI for social good. What are we after? Without further ado, Dr. Kokuryo.
안녕하십니까? Good afternoon.
안녕하십니까?
안녕하십니까? Let me first express my greatest respect to STEPI to organize this symposium to really address the good of humanity. I think this is it's a very important timing to talk about such issues. In addition to the introduction, I am also right now leading a lead researcher for Japan Science and Technology, the agency's human IT ecosystem, where I organize a lot of social scientists and as well as humanity scholars to give feedback to technological development programs of the Japanese government. And in that context, I think we are beginning to reach a stage where we really have to ask our objectives, meaning that before it's a relatively simple thing of trying to develop accelerated economic developments, where technology providing more convenience, technologies providing more efficiencies to the economy, really fueling the economic growth and the prosperity of people. While that remains a very important topics, I think as the technology, information technology, is starting to really reach the very heart of the people. I mean, it's so close to the daily living of the people, and really affecting the human psychology. I think the issue is becoming a little bit more complicated than that. And in that context, we are starting to explore goals like sustainability, goals like well-being, and goals like resilience. But then these things tend to be fairly ambiguous in terms of technological development goals. So very often things we, being the social scientists and humanity people, ask the technologies to do is sometimes very perplexing even and ambiguous to them. So I think we're reaching a stage where we need to have a more broader view of concurrent engineering of social and technical systems so that institutional system design, law, and business model are simultaneously developed with the technology, with a really clearer vision in mind for what we are trying to accomplish. Just as an example, I am an advisor to the newly created Japan's digital agency, which was only created in September 1, where the slogan of the agency is digitalization that leaves nobody left behind and to be gentle to everyone, which of course sounds very good. But then when it really comes to, so then what are we going to develop? Now, this is only my interpretation of the slogan, but it probably means we are trying to develop systems that are customized to each individual. Of course, just 10 years ago, oops. You don't see my presentation?
No, no. So I think, yeah, just take your time and share your files.
Is this good?
Yep.
Sorry. So the first slide that so this was the first page, this was the second page. And we need a concurrent engineering of the total integrated systems. And probably we are talking about developing technologies that really addresses the need of each individual. 10 years ago, information technology meant really delivering similar services to lots of people more efficiently. Now we are reaching a stage where the services can be customized to the needs of each individual person and addressing the needs so that everyone can be included. And of course, we also want a resilient society where flexibility is acquired for adapting to changing needs. This probably more technically leads to the management of identity of people, and of course in today's IoT and 5G context, identity of things. And of course, these, because they are highly sensitive, we are in need for a platform for very secure data sharing. Now it gets touchier and touchier as I speak. And of course, we need to be mindful to control the perils of data. Of course, privacy, of course, a breach is one of the things that we have at the center of the mind. Data can be used in ways people's dignity are violated, and data can be used to exploit people for selfish interests. And these are some of the social challenges that we need to address in order to really reap the benefits of the information technology. So the question is, how can we share and protect data simultaneously? Now, my argument is, I know I'm not majority in this. I'm a minority speaker on this particular topic. But I am recently advocating that we may want to really rethink from the fundamental philosophy, the social philosophy, for the building of the society as a whole. Meaning, we've been in the Western world with adopting Western modernity based on individuality and human right, bringing huge economic benefits, and with the belief that the individual pursuit of happiness leads to societal good, which leads to liberalism, democracy, economy based on private ownership of property, data ownership restricting the use of data. Now, while these have these remain still very important values, we are grappling with another reality of data that has a network externality. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. Has benefits in accumulating and sharing, can better be governed with a normalization style communalism. And I think in summary, should data belong to individual or to the society? Now, I am bringing this up. I don't, probably Korea people share same kind of concern with the Japanese about the conflict between the US and China right now, and increasingly getting very ideological, which is probably not very productive. And we probably need to come with some kind of philosophy that can bridge the East and West. Now here, as a student of economy and business, I really come back to the fundamental of this, is that there are some economic forces that are making such re-questioning of philosophy almost inevitable. One is network externality, which is the phenomenon of value increasing as the number of users increase. And that goes right against the basic economic assumptions of the market economy. And of course, the second point is the zero marginal cost or very low marginal cost, which for those of you who studied microeconomics must have learned that the market pricing mechanisms is based on the assumption that the marginal cost exists and it probably increases. And then the traceability is another big point. The modern industrial economy has been developing by expanding its market. Large investment in production system required large market to justify the fixed investment. So that's why the global economy has been expanding, which meant in the past that it was an economic system that assumed anonymity, that money, things can be changed, or the ownership of for things can be purchased by money anonymously. But of course, in this age of traceability, IoT, ubiquity of networks, we are already experiencing a much higher level of traceability, which is giving rise to alternative business models like the sharing model or the subscription model, very different forms of business model. So it's already happening. So in the bigger picture, I think we are, civilizationally, we are making transition to a world where the economy was based on the ownership exchange among individuals to people contributing and to and rewarding from the society. And I'm coining this as a potluck economy. And this makes sense because for the sustainability of Earth, this leads to maximum use of things, using technology to level demand and supply. Dynamic pricing is one of ways to do that. And from business model point of view, we are talking about yield management from assets. So I think we should, my argument is we should think of the whole picture in this kind of a bigger picture of how the economy and civilizations are making the transition too. And again, my argument is that perhaps some Asian philosophies like Confucianism, Buddhism, animism may have a role in our efforts at trying to build the next set of ethics and philosophies for governing the next civilization. I don't think I have time to go very deep into this, but of course, it's very dangerous to try to generalize all of this. And Confucianism itself is very complex with many different ways of thoughts. Buddhism, of course, and same applies to animism, and they are very different things. But of course, one of the things that seem common is all emphasizing harmony and respect and contribution to others instead of emphasizing individual rights and autonomy. So we really need to think about the ethics for the new civilization, where it's getting important to task individuals to honor the dignity of others as well as contribute to their well-being. And this is probably not a West versus East issue. It's a global issue that requires a global solution. And let me call upon the Korean people that probably in the world, Korea and Japan are in a very good place to try to propose something that bridges the West and the East. And in a much, we can put this in a much more practical context, which is the ground for regulation of big internet platforms. Interestingly, this is becoming on the agenda both in the East and the West, where on one hand, China is trying to regulate the private providers of digital services, and similar things are happening particularly in Europe of trying to somehow state control the big private companies. Now, characteristically, I think there are three different logics that are being applied. One is based on privacy. And and claiming major platforms are interfering with the free will of the individuals. And GDPR, which is very strongly founded on the philosophies of individualism, is one way, one logic being applied. And the other big logic, which actually China uses this too, is the anti-monopoly or anti-competitive logic, and some of the companies becoming too big and unfairly profitable. But the third one, which I think is common among the East and the West, and therefore I think there's a room for agreement, is the violation of fiduciary responsibilities. Rather than trying to control data, try to impose self-control of data, this one requires the platforms to honor the fiduciary responsibility to entrust the data. Here, the question is, when big platforms, particularly private platforms, are in possession of personal data, are they using the data in the interest of the end users, or are they using the data for the interest of the sponsors? And probably we should impose fiduciary responsibilities so that they honor the responsibility for the end users. One final point I'd like to make before ending is another angle where the East and the West seem quite different, is the relationship between man and machine. If you remember, initially I said I'm the leader of Human IT Ecosystem Project at the Japan Science and Technology Agency. We had a long debate about how to name it. Initially, the proposal was Human-Centric IT Project. But after a fair amount of discussion, we thought that we should position ourselves so that in thinking that perhaps human being is not at the top of the world or at the center of the world, that we should consider human being as a humble part of the ecosystem of the cosmos. Meaning that we should not try to frame this as master-slave relationship between man and machine. I think there's a long Asian tradition of perceiving man as part of rather than on top of nature. Japanese animation has a very long history of recognizing persona and even emotion in robots. I mean, all this becomes relevant because we are right now struggling with the thought of machines having mind and intellect of their own, and to what extent we should allow machines to make decisions on our behalf. And here, I think we are now reaching a stage when something like conviviality with machines is now becoming necessary to face the reality of the technology and to really live with the technology happily together. I know I have laid out a set of very provocative points, but I would very much welcome any reaction to them. But for now, I'm very, very grateful that I have been given the opportunity to talk about this with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kokuryo. So we'll be discussing on this interesting talk after Professor Bajel talks. So we have Professor Fernanda Bajel from Argentina. So she is from National University of Cuyo, Medonzo, Argentina. She's also a chair of UNESCO Advisory Committee on Open Science Recommendations. So she's a socialist and PhD in political and social sciences with postdoctoral studies at the Center de Sociologie Européenne, EHESS, Paris, and principal researcher at the National Council of Scientific and Technical Research. So she has a lot of experiences on these issues. Today, she'll be talking, on strengthening, the UNESCO recommendations on open science and its implications on public trust in science, which is, I think, tremendously needed these days. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Professor Bajel.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on your location. I am Fernanda Bajel from Argentina, and I am very, very delighted to be in this conference with all of you, and very thankful to the STEPI organizing committee. And I would like to also thank especially to Eun Shin for her company during the process of the recommendation of open science. In this talk, I would like to address the UNESCO recommendation on open science and its implications in the public trust in science. I think that an important way to start thinking about the process of the construction of this text that has been approved by UNESCO last week is to say, first of all, that the open science movement as a global movement started several decades ago. In the 1960s, with the transformation, the information exchange groups of the National Institute of Health, and then in 1971 with the Gutenberg Project by Michael Hart, in the 90s, the first repositories for open evaluation of manuscripts, for example, AXVIV, created in 1991, and by the same decade in Latin America, I would like to mention the digital journals, databases, and indexing systems that were created, such as Cielo, Latindex, and Redalic. First of all, Latindex in 1994, Cielo in 1998, and Redalic in 2003. We had in Latin America a very important amount of national journals that became what we could say regional journals in open access, full open access from the beginning, and offering the region very important scientific production for the regional dialogue, and expecting, of course, a global dialogue too. In 2002, we have the important open access initiative in Budapest, and then we could mention other declarations in favor of open access that are part of this history of the open science movement, such as Bethesda or Berlin in 2003 and Salvador de Bahia. In the next slide, if you think about what is the importance of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and what lessons this pandemic has given the humanity and the scientific community, and how this boosted the movement of open science, I think the first thing we should mention is the fact that it became clear for not only for scientists and policymakers, but also to citizens, that the scientific progress, as it was said in the Declaration of the United Nations back then in 1945, that in the creation also of UNESCO in 1946, that scientific progress is a human right. And the importance of a timely and free access to scientific data, publications, and information became like clear as a starting point from this sanitary emergency at a global level. I think that this pandemic also let everybody see the relevance of scientific collaboration and the importance of sharing information at all levels. It also let us see all that the need to boost and to improve the interactions between science, policymakers, and society. Because normally science and its discoveries or products were understood as a result that were in one direction going to society, but not precisely in a dialogue or in a way in which this society's citizenship and the public could be able to participate. Well, this in the pandemic was also placed into debate. And finally, the idea that open science is a keystone to broaden the human right to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress became a reality since the first moment that most of the scientists in the academic community had to work from home, right? So we have many reasons to think that indeed the pandemic boosted the movement of open science. Now, even if many years ago the open science movement and the main actors that are part of this movement were aware of the need to discuss globally what is the definition of this term open science and what's the difference with open access, which is far more known by the community. And before the initiation of the pandemic, in the 40th conference of UNESCO that was held in 2019, the organization understood that there was a need for an open science global framework. And so this conference decided to create a steering committee and to create a text that is a recommendation. As you know, it is soft law. Nobody is forced in any country to do exactly what this text says, but it is really, the recommendations by UNESCO are really an important reference, and they have proven as an important way for change in the national level and even in the local level. And so the idea was to create a steering committee and a first draft in order to create a consensual definition of open science, shared principles and values, a set of actions also, in order to boost the movement of open science and open science itself in different parts of the world. So how was this road to the recommendation? In the next slide, I would like to show you very generally how this process to create a recommendation worked. First of all, as you can see there, from the beginning of 2020, the UNESCO prepared many different types of consultations, electronic consultations, the establishment of this Open Science Steering Committee, which we were part since May 2020. All this process was really a very intense discussion between 30 experts that were part of the steering committee, and I had the honor of being selected as the chair of this experts committee. And we had many virtual sessions. We could never meet personally in these 2 years, working towards this text that could generate the definition, the general principles, the different areas of action of open science, and general ideas for the plans of action. And so during 2020, firstly, our task was to create this outline and the first draft. And from the beginning of 2021, this year until May, the first draft of the recommendation was sent to the member states for their comments. So there was not only consultations, global consultations to different parts of not only the academic community, students, and the participation was really very important, particular groups and key actors that are part of open science regarding infrastructures, regarding universities and different areas of action. But also in January 2021, the process started to be a dialogue between the countries in the process of negotiating this text in order to arrive to the general conference that was held in the last 2 weeks, from the 9th to the 24th of November, recently passed. And so all these consultations and discussions during the year of 2021 led to the communication for the Director General in May 2021 of the approval in the intergovernmental meeting that was a very participative meeting with 193 countries that are part of UNESCO. I think more than 100 participated with experts. And after this meeting of the special intergovernmental committee, the final draft project for open science recommendation was sent to the Director General. And as you all know, it was adopted very recently. And so if we now go on to the next slide and we try to make a synthesis of what is the recommendation and what are the main pillars of open science according to the definition proposed. First of all, we have open science as open access as one of the, of course, most important elements. Open access to publications, to journals, open access to data sets, software and hardware, and the open licenses. Then we have the general idea of openness regarding an open dialogue within the scientific community between different epistemologies, different methodologies and knowledge systems, but also an openness to indigenous knowledge. And the third pillar has to do with open infrastructures, which is a critical point because it has to do with instruments and databases that imply digital infrastructures that remind us of an issue that was central in the discussion of the steering committee and the elaboration of this draft, which is the international digital divide and the inequalities that affect different countries coming from the north or the south, or the relations, the unequal asymmetries that we find between the periphery and the central countries. And so in this point, the concern about interoperability between these infrastructures that have to be created for open science is a concern that has to do also with the digital divide. But I would like to mention now a fourth pillar that is very important here, and which is citizen science. I think that open science, when we understand that it is not only a matter of open access, but also, or open infrastructures, but also a matter of participation, participatory science, and to create new interactions between science and society. Well, open science as a central part of this project is conceived also as citizen science, which means the participation of the citizens in or different social groups, communities, organizations of the civil society within the process of the research. This means not only to receive a result just as a receptor of what science has to do or has to say or has to offer, but also the participation in the process. We have many experiences already of research projects regarding, for example, the research on the oceans or beaches that really serve from the knowledge that is within the communities that live in those coasts, and many other examples of the knowledge that is behind the communities and the everyday experience of the community. And this is a very important way to improve the interactions between society and science, and especially to how to build this trust in science that was so critical during the pandemic that we're living still until now. So finally, the other pillar that the recommendation is proposing is the need for rewarding and improve the public funding, of course, for the open science, and changes in the assessment system. I mean, if research assessment does not change the indicators for which the scientists are evaluated, well, it's very difficult to tell our researchers that they have to change their practices towards open access, open data, open infrastructures, and participatory science. So I would like now to go on to the next slide, in which to make a particular comment on citizen science. I would like to say that in Latin America, we have an extended tradition in the universities of what in English is called third mission, in Spanish is called extension, university extension. And this is a long existent tradition of an accumulation of interactions with the community. All the universities in Latin America have, from the beginning of the 20th century, this particular mission, which is called extension, and projects that have a long extended interactions with specific and concrete projects with the community. And this increases the connection of scientific research with local needs, and also local relevance, social relevance and local needs. And so to promote the interactions between researchers, policymakers, and organizations from the civil society means a huge change for science. And that is what the project of Open Science is proposing, to change the way in which science is produced. So if we go now to the next slide, I would like to go deep in one of the issues that was addressed by the recommendation of Open Science and the steering committee, which has to do with inequalities, which has to do with international asymmetries. If you see in this slide the comparison between the global distribution of repositories, which are central repositories not only of published production, but also data sets of open data sets. And in the upper part of this slide, you can see in the dark blue that, of course, the North has, in what comes to repositories of production, a very important development. But also, if you see in the South, the region I know well and better is Latin America on your left, the whole South America, and including Mexico, and not so much Central America, but Mexico and South America, you can see this dark blue because we have a federation of repositories that is called La Referencia, which harvests more than 800 institutions from 10 countries. And so in terms of the repositories of publications, we are really in an advanced stage. Now, if you go to the lower part of this slide, you can see that in terms of open data repositories, which mean a more complex type of infrastructure, the South is really in light blue, including Latin America. That is, if you compare South America in the upper slide, in the upper part and in the lower part, you can see the difference. So the recommendation of Open Science was also concerned about the infrastructure divide, not only the digital divide in general, but also the infrastructural difference between these countries. And this was addressed in the recommendation. If we now go to another concern that has to do with the global division in terms of development and asymmetries, in the next slide you can see that there are other concerns that this recommendation addressed, and that has to do also with improving the interactions between civil society and science, and to improve the public trust. And this has to do with the social relevance of science and the local relevance of the research. I'm speaking about the fact that most of our scientific publications and scientific structures are in English, developed in English. And so the hypercentrality of English has been discussed in the last 2 decades, but particularly I would like to show or to mention some milestones in the last 4 or 5 years that have discussed in the global arena the importance of promoting in public policies multilingualism and bibliodiversity. Because as you know, also in the international community, the paper has been replacing books for many decades. And then today, the mainstream publishing is articles and articles in English. But I would like to mention the Appel de Jésus and the Helsinki initiative in a very important way, because it has many signatures already from institutions and persons. And they say, well, there is a huge cultural loss resulting from the growth of hypercentrality of English in scientific publishings, and also in the risks it means in diminishing the linguistic diversity of research and the possibility to improve the links and in the interaction with the local communities. And so this, all these concerns are also involved in the main actions by the Latin American Forum on Research Assessment, which I would like to mention. It was created in 2019, and it is creating, I think, important milestones in the international debate on these issues, particularly in the social sciences and humanities in this case. And finally, of course, the recommendation of open science, which I think explicitly has taken this in the center of the debate. And so now I would like to finish this by saying, well, what is the relevance of the recommendation of open science within all these concerns that we have in the global level, and to improve these interactions between the communities and science, and to improve the possibility of creating or orienting science towards local relevance and the interaction with local communities. Well, I think that the open science recommendation is a first consensus that it is unanimously accepted by 193 countries. And this unanimous approval was very important, and we're all very happy with this. And I would just like to show some pictures of this moment, because I had the honor of participating in the General Conference now as a part of the Argentinian delegation, and to be a part of the discussion of the recommendation and its approval. And I prepared some pictures for you to see as we were participating in commission first, and then the day in which this was discussed in the plenary, and finally the moment in which it was approved unanimously, as I said, with no amendments and no discussions of the content. And so I think in this point we have a very important international legal instrument to work on our different countries according to our different situations and diversity. And so at the final moments of these presentations, I would like to say that open science has the potential to increase the resilience of societies, to improve the quality of science and its transparency, making it more collaborative and participative. And so I think that these are the elements that will build or rebuild the trust in science. But in order to do so, we need to improve the interactions with the local communities and the possibilities of these communities to participate effectively in the process of scientific research. We need indeed more inclusive, accessible, and diverse science, and with an awareness of the global, regional, national, and local inequalities. I thank you very much, and I'm eager to listen to any questions that you can have, or propositions that you can make in order to advance in the path towards open science. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Baihil. So these two wonderful talks are now open to discussion. Before going into the discussion, I'd like to invite 3 more wonderful fellows for the discussion panels. The first is Dr. Chan-Soo Park from STEPI. So he's here now. And right, and secondly, this wonderful session is actually on hybrid, so we have some more people online. So Professor Park Bom-soon from KAIST is online. Can you say hello to us? Right, I think we have about 15 to 20 minutes for the discussion. So, well, who will begin, or shall I begin by just breaking the ice? Right, I was just really intrigued by both of you, the talks, but I first like to ask Dr. Baihel for the open access initiative in UNESCO. So, I mean, I fully support the open access or open science movements around the world, and I do believe that these movements will really make all the people getting into knowledge much faster, access into the knowledge, and that would actually help more people in the globe. But one thing that you didn't mention, and I'm very sure that you'd be very aware of, is about those publishing groups which are actually getting money too much from the authors who are publishing. So we call them like predatory journals. So there are gray areas, but I'm quite new to these predatory journals, but it's actually hurting the open access or open science movements around the globe. So what is your view from UNESCO on these predatory journals? How can we avoid these and actually make the good for everybody?
Yes, hello. I don't know if you can listen to me correctly.
Oh, yeah, we hear you very well.
That's great. I'm very thankful to STEPI for inviting us social scientists to this discussion, and very grateful to all of you. And first of all, I was thinking many things to make a dialogue with Professor Kokuryu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, but now that you, Professor Lee, is asking this interesting question, which is very well related to the tradition in Latin America regarding the open access and what we call diamond open access, I would like to say, and not to take too much time on this, but just to say that at the process of the building of the text, the first draft of the recommendation, all the experts involved were completely aware of this problem, and to the extent that you can see in the text an explicit recommendation against commercial publishing and against what we call the article processing charges. This APC, I think that at the end of the day is one of you could say the causes of the increase of predatory publishing, because predatory publishing could be defined basically as a type of commercial journal that ensures researchers, very rapid publication, and you're supposed to receive a very rapid reward in your evaluation or assessment system because your publication is very quick. And many researchers unfortunately, they cannot differentiate sometimes one predatory publishing from an academic and good level publishing, because increasingly many journals are entering this business model. And so I think we were very aware of this, and the real cause of the increase of predatory publishing has to do with the increase of APC as a result of some of the alternatives for open access that have been taken, especially in Europe with Plan S, Coalition Plan S, which has been boosting these type of new models of publishing. Instead, in Latin America, we have a tradition that's completely diamond open access. 92% of the journals in Latin America are diamond, which means nobody pays for reading nor for publishing, and mainly because these journals are completely in the hands of the universities or the scientific societies and not the commercial publishers. I hope I can be clear. I have been clear on this.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful. I was very glad to hear that. So for those who are not really familiar with what I call the predatory journals, and Professor Baihel mentioned about, is that, open science movement is really something that maybe we human race should go for, but because it is based on the open access, there are some publishing groups which are actually taking the money from the authors and just publish. So that lacks rigorous peer review, so it could actually hurt the community of having kind of not trustworthy results, and also exploiting article publishing charges are too expensive. So that's actually hurting some of the developmental countries as well. So we became aware of that in Korea and also in Seoul National University. So I actually asked Professor Baihel about what is UNESCO's view on this high APC charging predatory journals, and she has given us some of the I think this could be one of the solutions, that in Latin America, 92% of the journals are actually free of charge, but in open access. So that's actually maybe the way we should go, we should be heading for. But of course, there are a lot of hurdles because of the publishing market itself. But anyway, that was a wonderful answer. Thank you very much. So Professor Baihel, you said that there was some questions that you had for Professor Kokurio. I know that the internet might be not that well serving for you in some cases. So before something goes wrong, would you like to give the question to Professor Kokurio first?
Well, it was not a question. It was just a dialogue with Professor Kokurio, because I really enjoyed much of your presentation. And I think that, well, thinking on what we could discuss between your invocation of the Asian community tradition and the Latin American regional community tradition, I think that if you ask yourself or you go deep into the idea of the slogan, where you started saying, well, it is a big and nice slogan just to say, well, we have to share. And sometimes the UNESCO recommendation can be understood, or you can feel it as only a slogan. And I think we're in the moment in which the UNESCO recommendation is proposing, of course, well, we could even think of a utopian type of project, right? Can you confirm if you're listening to me, please?
We hear you well. Yeah, don't worry. The internet went slow now.
Oh, perfect. Okay, I think I'm back here, right? And I was saying that when we generally say, people can ask themselves, well, what about the protection? And Professor Kokurio said, well, we're in opposition between the individual and so this opposition between individual and society hides that we have many communities involved here in the research, scientific research process. We have national communities, we have regional communities, we have epistemic cultures and disciplines in the global, national, and local scale. And I think that the project of open science is a multi-scale challenge, which means that we could, of course, just fall in this general and abstract slogan and say we have to go to the global share. But I would say that in our discussions in the recommendation, the most important thing is to make an inversion in this challenge, which is to go from the local to the national to the regional and then to the global, because that's the way in which we can really be aware and take into account the protection of the communities at stake. I mean, local communities, national, regional, the individuals, of course, at stake as a subject, for example, for biological research. And I think that the main challenge here is to understand that it is a multi-scale challenge to share and to arrive to open science, but we have to think from the local onto the global, not in the inverse way. It's going to be very difficult only to start from the abstract, right, to the concrete actions.
Yeah, Professor Kokurio?
Thank you very much. I kind of agree that we should start from the very concrete and then go to the abstract. Maybe my talk started with the abstract and went to the concrete. So maybe the other way might have been better. But one of very concrete issues we have right now is the fact, I think, that the observation that that this permission-based control of personal data, like you click, you approve somebody to use my data. I don't think that's functioning. That there are, I think today's consumers are overburdened by so many permissions the companies are asking, and are without consideration clicking yes to things without knowing, and that this information overload issue is making it pretty impractical to assume the self-control of data notion to continue. That's my fundamental. I mean, that's my starting point. And so, is there an alternative? And the alternative of saying no to everything, the opt-in choice, that making no as a default, really prohibits us from making use of data. I mean, when we think of COVID-19 and the benefits of societies sharing information for fighting against COVID-19, we probably should be able to make use of the collected data. So really the question is how to balance these things. And my tentative answer to that is to ask whoever has the data to honor the fiduciary responsibilities, meaning that the check, the governance, should be targeting at the goodwill of the platforms, that they are actually using the data in the interest of the users rather than the sponsors making. So we will be checking on things like conflict of interests, and we will be checking on the governance structure of data and so forth. Instead, right now, the approach is to ask these platforms to specify the objectives of using and how to use the data, and to really giving each individual the right to control the data, which I think is getting out of hand. So it's from that kind of trying to, I mean, these are the immediate issues I think we need to address in a very close near future. And this is not perhaps region by region by region, but I think we should, I mean, these are the concrete issues that requires, I think, a philosophical background. to come to resolution. So that's where I would.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the discussion is getting hotter and hotter. So I believe that both Dr. Park have opinions and things to say about these discussions. So who will begin first? Dr. Park Chan-soo? Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank the two professors for their insightful presentation and dialogue. My name is Park Chan-soo from STEPI, Director of the Research Division on Innovation Strategy for Growth. I prepared my discussion by giving some short comments on two interesting presentations and then introducing Korean's open policy platform case. I enjoyed Professor Jiro Kokuro's philosophical presentation on Japan's policy experiments to expand public trust through the use of artificial intelligence technology. I appreciate the Japanese Digital Agency policy experiment for its inclusiveness and resilience and ethical aspects. I was also impressed with Professor Fernanda Bayel's recommendation that public trust can be improved through open science. As the presenter said, open science are divided into the open access and dialogue and infrastructure and collaboration with the citizen throughout the entire research process. One more thing coming up to my mind is civil society participation in scientific activities, just like living labs in Korea. It is a key pillar in the global transitional innovation policy discussion and could also be a meaningful consideration as a device to increase the reliability of public research. And finally, I would like to introduce Korea's experimental attempt on the Open Innovation Policy Platform. It is an attempt to utilize the opinions of the potential beneficiaries of public policy or consumer group in the policy formulation process. It's a 5-year project that started in 2020, and 4 public research institutes, including STEPI, are conducting the project. The 4 different themes are smart production, smart mobility, smart service, and data platform. This OIPP started in the background of changes in economic paradigm, such as digital transformation, post-industrial revolution, and increasing social interest and demand for data utilization. The characteristics of OIPP project can be described into the following 3. From the perspective of the expansion of the participant in policy building, it designs the innovative policy ideas and measures by listening to opinions from field experts and citizens. From the perspective of innovation-friendly institution design, it aims sustainable governance structure to improve institutional efficiency. Last, from the perspective of sector or technology, it aims to derive policy recommendations to secure future innovation growth engine. Actually, you can check all the activities of the policy platform in the website www.oipp.kr. But unfortunately, the website is only in Korean. I hope that new initiatives from countries around the world, including Japan and Korea, and the international organizations such as UNESCO, can be shared and linked to achieve effective policy outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I mean, sooner or later, I'm sure STEPI would create the English version of this wonderful website, which could be linked with the UNESCO and also with what Professor Kokuro is doing. So that would be wonderful. We have 5 minutes, so I'd like to really invite Professor Park from KAIST, who is online. Professor Park, do you have comments or discussions, anything?
Right. Well, first of all, thank you very much, STEPI, for inviting me to this very important symposium. And also thank you, Professor Kokuro and then Professor Bayel. Wonderful talks. I learned a lot, and thank you. And I am trained in history of science. I'm also teaching science policy at KAIST, and I'm also studying Anthropocene, the concept, the geological concept, which deals with the climate change and other environmental problems. And so I can talk a lot about how much I'm interested in and working on technological transformation of society and how science and technology and society are very much interrelated. And I'm fully in agreement with what you are saying about the development of science and technology should go along with the society. But today I'd like to raise one particular question to both of you, and then actually taking the point from your talks. And it is said that we are in crisis, the first pandemic crisis. But the much bigger and more important is climate crisis. Okay, it's going to be a real changing things, and for existential issues. But at the same time, the people are talking about triple crisis, which is about social inequality. I mean, the pandemic and the climate crisis do not distribute equally, and some people feeling the pain a lot. So in that situation, we are talking about how digital transition or AI or open access, like development of science and technology, can address these issues of crisis. And my question has to do with not just about how science and technology can solve these global problems, but rather how science and technology can be a problem or can be a solution to the inequality issue, justice issue, I mean distribution issue. And for example, there is a pollution and all kinds of problems being created in one place, but other places importing all sorts of clean products, and without talking about the environmental issues. And some people have to bear the brunt of climate issues, the climate crisis, and others not. And so how, for example, AI technology, I really like your suggestions of we need a new civilization, cyber civilizations, and not just claiming for individual rights, but talking about honoring others' dignity, and then sharing common interests, and that sort of a paradigm shift in our understanding of democracy and freedom is essential. And also open science issue. I thought that open science is a sort of an extension of open access movement, which started in around 2000. But from your talk, I realized that it's more than that. It's a really open dialogue with a number of peoples and with the different epistemological systems and the knowledge structure and the indigenous people. And so, and then citizens are just not just sharing the outcomes of the science and technology, but also being a part of the knowledge production process. And then I don't know whether this kind of openness And then this kind of a new civilization can be a good way of dealing with inequality issue or in general the global climate issue, global crisis. I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So yes, I was intrigued by what he mentioned about the inequality around the globe, which we experience already very much in this pandemic era. That we thought that having the vaccine would actually terminate this pandemic, but because in some regions like western part of Africa or where southern part of India, where they had very, like a low percentage of the vaccination, therefore the variants created out. So the whole world is again at danger having this pandemic. I mean, we are not really hopeful for terminating this pandemic soon. So we really realize that it's actually this whole human race in this globe is all one, that it's not about somebody being better off, but actually we have to unite together and also share everything. That would actually maybe make the world much better. So I think all of us actually agreed about that. Knowledge and even the vaccine and social impacts and the knowledge, even any of the data, and the data should be shared. Otherwise, they are not going to be used that much for this human race. Well, the time's up, so I'm sad I have to close this session. Well, thank you very much for all these two speakers and also all two Dr. Parks, one online and one here from STEPI. I'd like to close this session by thanking everybody who's here and also online. That I must say that this discussion was very, very helpful for everybody. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody would express the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Lee, and thanks again to all our wonderful speakers and panelists for an insightful discussion. We will now close session 1 and have a 10-minute break. We would deeply appreciate your continued interest in session 2 as well. We will come back in 10 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Let us begin with session 2, Vision for Global Cooperation in Science and Technology. Dr. Yong-Seok Chang, Senior Research Fellow at STEPI and also Chair at CSTP of OECD, will be kindly leading the second session. Please join me to welcome Dr. Chang to the floor.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Well, thank you for a kind introduction. I'm Yong-Seok Chang, Senior Research Fellow at STEPI. We just heard, the first session, which is quite, focused on building public trust in the science. Well, open science is very much, important issue in this day. This open innovation is not possible without, international cooperation. So, this session will mainly focus on international cooperation in science technology, mainly perspective from international organizations, which is very much playing an important role in bringing global consensus on that. So in that sense, it is quite a meaningful session, I believe. Well, this current corona pandemic gives us many lessons. One of them is actually the importance of science and technology in addressing such grand challenges, grand crisis. Another important issue is how to bring up and scaling up international cooperation in science technology. in order to address not only directly addressing the current crisis, but also the future challenges, including climate emergency. And previous prior session already talked about the global inequality distribution program. So in that sense, I'd like to, in this context, I'd like to invite two distinguished speakers and two panelists. Let's see. Before moving up, there's a couple of housekeeping notes. Since we have very limited time, I'd like to ask all speakers and panelists to keep your time limits as much as possible, but I will be very flexible, okay? For all speakers, I will give you 25 minutes to each of you, and to the panelists, about 5 to 8 minutes to each of you. After the first round, I will ask 3 fundamental questions, which is that, first, what are the major background of the recent geopolitical conflicts, especially the two superpowers, in terms of the technology competition, and what are the impacts on global science technology cooperation? And the second is that what should be the priority actions of science diplomacy from the national and international perspective for restoring or strengthening of global STI cooperation. And third one is how to effectively engage developing countries in global STI collaboration. So I prepared, already asked to all speakers and panelists to address these questions, but I will come back to later on that. Since we do not have interactive facility, even though it is broadcasting lively, I'm very sorry not to take your questions, but you may directly contact all speakers and panelists after this symposium. Okay, no further delay. I will invite the first speaker, the OECD. Dear my colleague, Mario Cervantes. He is a senior economist in OECD's Science Technology Policy Division, where he supports analytical policy research and external relations of the OECD Committee for Scientific and Technological Policy. In particular, he leads the work on international cooperation in science, technology, and innovation to address the grand challenges, including the SDGs. So he supports the committee's global relations and outreach with non-member economies, including Brazil, China, Russia, and South Africa. Prior to joining the OECD, Mr. Cervantes was a telecommunications researcher at Columbia University's Institute for Teleinformation in New York. So, floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Zhang. So I'm Mario Cervantes with the OECD's Committee for Science and Technology. Although the OECD is not a UN body, the committee does bring together around 95% of the global R&D in the world through its 38 member countries, but also the partners such as Brazil, South Africa, Argentina, Thailand, the other BRICS countries. Now, international cooperation is has been very much the purview of scientists and scientific institutions, with little political interference over the decades, especially because a lot of the international cooperation concerns upstream research. But increasingly, as Dr. Zhang mentioned, geopolitical situation and the importance of science and technology for innovation means that there is increased attention to how this cooperation can be mobilized and structured in this context of geopolitical tension, but also how can it be mobilized to address not just research challenges, not just the curiosity of researchers, but also the global challenges, in particular the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'll walk through some of the characteristics of the international cooperation based on the OECD data, and then I will discuss some of the issues that I think could address. So international cooperation accounted for around 25% of all scientific publishing. Collaboration is on the rise, international collaboration especially. The single author papers are not on the rise, are going downwards. Of course, this varies across countries. Some countries are naturally more inclined to cooperate internationally, such as small countries, small economies, especially in the EU area. There has been long-standing networks and infrastructure to support collaboration. Funding from the European Commission supports collaboration. So money is also a driver of this collaboration, as well as access to resources and the best research. It's widespread, but it's still concentrated, as I said, as the US and China are the main nodes of international cooperation, but with broad networks around, you see some here in linking up to Asia, with Korea, China, Japan, also in North America, smaller cooperation with Latin America, but concentrated mainly with Europe and the US. So it's interesting that a lot of cooperation happens around these global nodes, and there's less intra-regional cooperation because often the incentives for the networks have not been established yet. So it could be something, for example, in Southeast Asia, where there's scope for more strengthening the regional collaboration. Similarly, in South America, a lot of countries collaborate with EU countries, less amongst themselves, but there's efforts now to try to foster more regional cooperation. As I said, this cooperation is for science, but there's a lot of interest now in shifting policies towards SDGs in countries' own countries, but also with regard to their international cooperation activities. So we see here now, there's been a shift over the last decades of public R&D support towards societal challenges, health and society, funded in infrastructure, and of course, jobs and employment. We see the support for industry and industry development. Industry and innovation is one of the SDGs, the SDG 9, if I recall correctly. And it's also one where there's a lot of employment benefits. So there's a lot of effort to direct innovation to that. We see that with the support to digitalization. Now, there's also been discussion recently in terms of orienting mission-oriented policies in countries to try to tackle specific SDGs. Now, many of these initiatives are very much focused on national missions. With the EU, there's been now an interest to broaden this to international cooperation, cooperation around clean energy missions, for example. But this is still still very much a nationally oriented agenda. So this is one area where collaboration would be needed. So as I said, most international cooperation is organized to support basic and applied science, not to address grand challenges specifically. Most cooperation happens amongst the OECD countries and with BRICS, but many of the grand challenges face disproportionately affect lower developing countries that don't have capacity to engage in collaboration. They don't have research funding councils, they don't have strong institutes. And this is one where there's also a need to align the development agenda with the research. So this research is concentrated very much in the OECD and BRICS countries. Despite that, the budgets for international activities are rather small compared to national R&D budgets. Both in the US and the EU, estimated that around 5% of the national R&D budgets go to international cooperation. Similarly, the science technology activities in the official development assistance that countries provide to developing countries, around 5% of that is allocated to science and technology activities, mainly on the technology side, mainly to support industrial development, education, and health. There are new funding mechanisms that are trying to boost funding for international cooperation. We've seen some like the UK Global Challenge Fund, Canada's Grand Challenges Fund. Some of these are in the millions, some are even in the low billions of US dollars. During the COVID pandemic, of course, international cooperation has been very much tested, encouraging countries to come together and share genomic data on the coronavirus. The initial response was very strong in terms of demonstrating the benefits from international cooperation. But there were some challenges in terms of the unequal distribution of these benefits. Oftentimes, the national interests undermined cooperation among countries and the role of multilateral institutions. So international cooperation also comes with opportunities and risks that need to be managed to maintain trust. That's another lesson that we learned from the COVID pandemic. We've also seen that COVID, just as we saw with COVID disrupting the supply chains in the economy, the automobile sector, for example, it's also showed there's an interdependence in terms of global value chains for research and internationalization of research, whether it's research materials or research equipment or research data. There is very much a growing interdependence that the countries need access to these resources. So there's now a tension between, on the one hand, calls for open science and public access, but also some increased national security, national protection of such research resources, including research data. So it's rather important, evident now that rules on research security must be aligned with both the economic, foreign ministries and the research ministries. And it's very important that universities and researchers are involved in developing these guidelines to have a balanced approach to avoid over-regulation of research and blocking international cooperation. The OECD has been developing guidelines to improve international cooperation in science and technology, reaffirming principles of mutual benefit, reciprocity, extending the scope of cooperation from basic research to the global challenges, balancing, as I said, the research, open science, and open access to the results of this cooperation with a harmonized understanding of scientific values and norms, scientific research integrity, research freedom and expression. The recommendation also calls for reducing participation of barriers, participation of women and national minority populations in these international projects. And it also calls for concrete actions to boost cooperation with the developing countries, dedicated funding mechanisms, joint research calls, mobility, which has been very much blocked by the COVID pandemic. And it also calls for considering ethics in the international research, especially as concerns research on human subjects. Ethics and scientific integrity are growing issues for science in general, but also for science cooperation. So that's one main instrument the OECD has been developing to facilitate cooperation. The other one focuses around access to data from the public funding as issue of building trust, covering technical standards, incentives and rewards, responsibility and stewardship, infrastructures, human capital, and of course, cooperation also on the access to open science and data sharing. So these are some ways forward that the OECD has been considering. In addition, there's other ways that policymakers can try to improve international cooperation. One is aligning national agendas, such as the mission-oriented policies I mentioned, with the international priorities. Oftentimes, the international priorities, whether it's development assistance, is made separately from the sectoral ministries or the research ministries. The SDGs are complex challenges, so interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary research is going to be needed, and there's a need to build up this capacity for multidisciplinary research. As I said, we need to link also the ODA, official development, with focus on innovation and not only research. Multi-stakeholder partnerships is important to generate the spillovers from the cooperation. A lot of the international cooperation could help boost the creation of global public goods like clean energy and access to education, water. And we also need to build up the capacity in the global south in terms of human capital. And of course, improving the global governance of cooperation through initiatives such as UNESCO, OECD rules, and soft law instruments, recommendations is a good way forward. We still need to pay more attention to research security in this geopolitical context. Cybersecurity is also becoming important. As I mentioned, there's a tension between open science and protecting these resources, which become important, both in cooperation and competition. So data governance, data access in international cooperation will be important. And there's also a need for, as I said, as part of the challenge of building capacity in the developing countries is the need to rethink the models for research and education working. So some of the joint research centers funded jointly by multiple countries, using the digital resources such as e-learning and data sharing platforms to build capacity for research in developing countries. I think it would be also important to have a common understanding of scientific integrity and ethics in international cooperation. And finally, we need some more innovative financing. The global support to R&D and innovation of the OECD and globally has, on the public side, has been pretty much stagnant over the past decades. And if we're going to mobilize science for the SDGs, we're going to have to increase funding. And that means also thinking of ways to bring public funding, matching private funding with philanthropies and the overseas development assistance. So that, Chairman, would be sort of my overview of the challenges facing international cooperation. You can find more information in our OECD Science, Technology, and Innovation Outlook. Our website is listed there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mario. It was very condensed and very clear and a summary of OECD's activities, and I guess you provided also some possible pathways for doing how to improve our global STI collaboration. Especially, I like your the evidences you provided, which is, I guess, very valuable assets of the OECD together. Well, no further delay, let me invite the second presentation, which is that focused on UN. Ms. Marta Perez Cuso, am I pronounced right? And she is currently, let me see, okay, Economic Affairs Officer, right? Technology and Innovation Section, Trade, Investment and Innovation Division of United Nations SCAP. So she leads the SCAP's program on inclusive technology and innovation policies to promote technologies and innovations that leave no one behind. And she also leads the SCAP's work on promoting enabling policy environment for inclusive business in Asia. She has over 18 years of work experience with the United Nations, providing policy advice on science, technology, innovation, and information and communication technology policies to govern across Asia and Latin America. Before joining SCAP, Ms. Perez Cuso worked with UNCTAD and Oxfam GB. She holds the Master of Science in Development Management, Open University, UK, and is, okay. So, floor is yours, Ms. Perez.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to speak at the STEPI Global Symposium. At ASCA, we're always pleased to collaborate with STEPI, and we've been working in tandem to promote science, technology, and innovation policies across Asia and the Pacific, and building the capabilities of policymakers. In this presentation, I hope to complement the very excellent presentation of Mario Cervantes and bring a bit, share with you some of the work that we've been doing over the past 4 years in supporting countries, so doing some international collaboration on STI policies with a very specific angle, the angle of trying to promote policies that bring more inclusive outcomes. And to start my presentation, I would like to start with a question for all of you. Next, please. And this question is the why. Why do we promote science, technology, and innovation policies? Why are you promoting science and technology activities? And for me, it's very important to take the time and to pause. Next, please. Traditionally, innovation policy has focused largely on economic objectives. For a long time, my work at the UN, working on innovation policy, focused on putting in place, working with governments, supporting them in putting in place science, technology, and innovation policies that promoted economic growth, ensure long-term productivity growth, and sustained productivity growth, that have diversified the economic base, that provided job opportunities. Next, please. So these are some of the primary reasons why we were working on the promotion of science, technology, and innovation. However, we have also seen that while science, technology, and innovation has brought economic growth, next, please, it has also brought environmental challenges. For example, we know that while emissions flattened in 2019, thanks to the increased use of renewable energy, greenhouse gas emissions will need to be reduced annually by 7% if we are to reach the set goals for 2030. In addition, next slide, economic growth has also brought the inequality challenge. Next, please. Innovation has brought much economic growth and social advances. However, even before the pandemic, despite economic growth and social advances, inequality was in the rise in our region. In Asia Pacific, the combined income inequality, as measured by the Gini coefficient, had increased over 5 percentage points in the last 20 years. That is, inequality is increasing, not decreasing. And despite the power of science and technology, at least 150 million children in South Asia and 80 million in East Asia and the Pacific region, that is about half of the school children, cannot be reached by digital and broadcast remote learning programs despite the technological advances, and have not been able to have education during school closures. Next. So we have a very daunting challenge in front of us, which is to achieve the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And for this, we need a new generation of science, technology, and innovation policies that address the triple bottom and leave no one behind. And I think we're, as Mario was saying earlier, we're seeing some shift in the policy mix of instruments towards achieving more social and environmental goals. We also think that we have to think about leaving no one behind. Next, please. And these are some of the policies or the new focus that we are seeing in this effort to go beyond economic gains and ensure also social development and environmental sustainability. We've seen policies that go beyond investing in large science and technology infrastructure, but that also encourage investments in innovation labs that address social problems, or in incubators and maker spaces that enable a broader and more diverse type of inventors, entrepreneurs, and students to experiment. We also need policies that go beyond providing public finance for research and development, but that are also able to leverage private investments for financial innovations that bring about social changes and address environmental challenges. We need policies that not only focus on building STEM skills, but that especially support women and minorities to lead fruitful STEM careers. And we also need policies that invest in the development of social entrepreneurship skills and that invest in developing a good understanding of ethics among science researchers and technology developers. We need inclusive innovation policies, and as Mario was talking before, mission-driven policies. Next, please. I would like now to focus your attention on how technology and innovation policies can deliver on our overall commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals of leaving no one behind. We know that the successful adoption of innovations has enabled many emerging economies to leapfrog into more efficient techno-productive standards, and has also enabled to make substantive social development and gains. But it has also exacerbated inequalities and has created new types of social divides and environmental hazards, has established new and sometimes harder to cross frontiers between those that benefit and those that are excluded. Let me give you some examples. Next, please. Technology companies and online platforms have seen rising stock prices despite a global economic crisis, and while over 400 million students are still out of schools. And I think it's time that we focus our attention on ensuring that existing technologies and innovations benefit those with the greatest needs, and that we ensure more of us can benefit from existing technologies. Next, please. So for us, it will be important that to consider that we may have to focus more, not just on the next frontier technologies, but also on how we can expand the frontiers of innovation so that more people can benefit from technology and innovation. And this is what we've been considering, we've been doing at ESCAP over the past 4 years. exploring what type of innovation policies and actions we can be promoting to ensure that more people can benefit. We've tried to bring an inclusive lens into the design of science, technology, and innovation policies. And to do that, we've used a framework along 4 dimensions. Next, please. This comes from a framework put forward by Nesta, an innovation agency from the UK, which says if we want to have more inclusive innovation policy, we have to look at what are the overall objectives that the policy is trying to achieve? What is the direction that the policy is trying to achieve? Who is going to benefit from the outcomes of that policy or strategy? The third is who is able to participate in innovation activities, in conducting research, in leading a career in STEM, in doing innovation activities. And the fourth question is who has a say in the development and formulation of that policy and in the evaluation and assessment of the results of that policy. So we thought those 4 questions we've sought to expand the frontiers of inclusive innovation through a number of strategic approaches. Next, please. And we've worked in those areas. Inclusiveness touches many different dimensions: geographical dimensions, economic dimensions, sectoral dimensions. So it's a never-ending job to be trying to be more inclusive. These are the areas where at ESCAP we've been working. We work in these areas because there was demand from member states to work in these areas, and there were opportunities to raise, but definitely are not the only areas to work when we want to consider more inclusive innovation policies. So we've worked at strategic approaches, so introducing an inclusive lens in STI policies, but also in policies that promote digital economies. We've also looked at promoting policies that promote not just, that go beyond promoting innovation for the poor, but that promote the innovation capabilities of the poor and what it's called grassroots, promoting grassroots innovations. And then we've also been looking at promoting inclusive growth through the promotion of innovative business models that seek not just the bottom line, but also social or environmental outcomes, what we call either inclusive business, social enterprises, or impact investment. And let me share, if I have a bit of time, let me share a bit of those examples of what we've been doing. Next, please. So in 2020, before the military coup, we support the government of Myanmar to develop its national science, technology, and innovation policy with an inclusive lens. This was a very deliberate objective that we brought to that cooperation. And as you can see, that objective was very clearly introduced in the title of the said policy, becoming an inclusive and sustainable Asian tiger. So the objective was no longer just to become the next Asian tiger, but an inclusive and sustainable one. We also introduced an inclusive lens in the design of the process. So we invited 16 Sherpas from the private sector, from academia and different ministries to participate throughout the whole formulation process, not just to give comments to a draft and document, but to participate and act as both providers of comments, of direction, but also as a source of information and reaching out to their respective networks. And also a point that was touched before on the need to build capabilities on STI. In the case of Myanmar, there was a need to develop STI policy-making capabilities. So we designed a formulation process that combined a training session with the co-creation of that policy. So we went through stages and we talked first training session on establishing goals and objectives, and then followed by a session on jointly co-creating what will be the goals and objectives for Myanmar. And also we introduced that inclusive lens in the analysis and the discussions of the policy formulation. So we made sure that the background analysis introduced an inclusive lens, that we brought into the formulation process specific sessions on discussing, for example, what are the social development aspirations of Myanmar. And next, please. This is an example of Dr. A.A. Tue. She was involved throughout the policy as a Sherpa, policy formulation process. She was a Sherpa. She came from the Mandalay Technological University. And as she said, her engagement went beyond consultative. They provided direct inputs to the draft policy and shared their knowledge with the whole team involved in the policy formulation process. Next, similarly, thank you. Similarly, we've introduced at the strategic level an inclusive lens in our work of supporting the development of inclusive digital economy strategies. This has been work done in collaboration with the Digital Pathways at Oxford. We collaborated in Mongolia. They've also worked in Bangladesh. And they introduced that inclusive angle in the objectives, the dialogues, and the governance. And as a result of that, very consciously introducing an inclusive lens, the strategy look at connecting the informal economy via digital platforms, introduce new approaches to delivering last mile connectivity, and also introduce an increased focus on the gender disparities and looking more carefully at the gender disparities within the strategy. Next, please. The other area where we've been working is looking at policies that promote grassroots innovation in Asia Pacific, expanding from the experience of the Honeybee Network in India, who over the past 30 years, they've been promoting grassroots innovators. And this is the promotion of grassroots innovators is really an activity that is bottom up. However, traditional science, technology, innovation policies do not really cater, and the programs do not really cater to support this grassroots innovation that may have brilliant ideas, but may not have the capabilities to disseminate or to commercialize those ideas, or even, and the systems may not offer them facilities to document those ideas. So what we've been trying to explore is ways where the promotion of grassroots innovation could be introduced in STA systems and policies. Part of that, and I'm very happy to say this is an example of South-South collaboration. Through this work, there was a lot of exchange of experience, particularly between India, Malaysia, and the Philippines. And the Philippines has now adopted the grassroots innovation development strategy. Next, please. Dr. Muruk Desan is an example of a grassroots innovator. It's someone that saw a problem of waste of banana leaves and tried to find a solution that could come up and result in a commercial product. Through his ingenuity and his perseverance to trying to find the right way to use that banana waste, he was able to develop a product. And then he was also able to benefit from some level of support that enabled them to develop a fully commercial company that now employs over 300 people, mostly women, and that exports its product. And I'm putting this example to showcase that there are possibilities also for grassroots innovators. And there's a lot of untapped potential among grassroots innovators to develop relevant solutions to local needs. And the last area, next please, where we've been working very intensively is in the promotion of innovative business models and that go beyond the bottom line. And in this, I would like to focus on the promotion of inclusive business models. These are business models that provide goods, services, and livelihoods on a commercially viable basis, often at a scale, to populations at the base of the economic pyramid. And these inclusive business models, you have the definition there on this slide. The importance of these business models is that they make sense for businesses because it's a new market opportunity. Also for governments, because in a way they're delivering either social goods and relevant goods and services to low-income people, or providing them with livelihoods opportunity. And also, this is also relevant for low-income people. This is a relatively new concept, inclusive business. The notion of social enterprises has been a bit longer. And the difference between the two is that social enterprises often depend on grants, while inclusive business are fully commercially businesses. They tend to be medium to large enterprises. And because they are large, they operate at scale. And because they operate at scale, they have the potential to deliver social impact at scale. And we've been working in Southeast Asia very strongly over the past 4 years. And we've seen already great success in the adoption at the regional level and at the national level of strategies to promote inclusive businesses. Next, please. This is an example of a CEO of Amru Rice in Cambodia, who has set up and developed fully commercial inclusive business models in organic rice, and through introducing a number of innovations and tweaks into the business model, he's able to reduce the risk of farmers, to give them more security, and by that develop a profitable business in the long term, while they're increasing livelihoods opportunities for low-income farmers. Next, please. So just to summarize, we've been reflecting on this work over the past, that we've been conducting over the past 3 years on the 4 questions on how we promote more inclusive innovation. And we've now summarized this work in a report on Frontiers of Inclusive Innovation, which is available online. And I'd like to, just to conclude my presentation, I would like to just share with you some of the thoughts of that self-reflection on our work. And next slide, please. It is clear for us that to achieve inclusive outcomes, we need deliberate efforts. It will not happen if we are not on purpose trying to be more inclusive. The being inclusive means dealing with trade-offs. And the question there, the critical question there is what trade-offs are acceptable and how to deal with the difficult trade-offs. Given that there are multiple needs, we need to be pragmatic. We need to focus our resources on what will be priority inclusion areas, or areas where we could have greater results. That to design for inclusive outcomes, we need a sound basis for formulating science, technology, and innovation policies. And many developing countries still don't have a large capacity on formulating STI policy. But in addition to that, we also need additional skills and different mindsets. And by that, I mean, we need additional skills of those of understanding how we promote inclusiveness and social development, in addition to how we promote science, technology, and innovation. And we need different mindsets because we need to formulate policies in a different way. We need to formulate these policies in a much more inclusive manner. And that requires being a mindset of being open to work with others, to try to test and to review what works and what doesn't. The fifth learning is that involving a broad range of stakeholders in the policy making process can enhance the understanding and the support for action. We still need more disaggregated quantitative data and qualitative data, but sometimes informal conversations or focus groups discussions can help us get some of that information. And throughout our work, it has become clear that we need that to achieve inclusive outcomes, we need further attention on how we are going to finance for inclusion, on the implementation of those inclusive STI policies, on monitoring and evaluation, and perhaps also on thinking more on what other ways that we can share the benefits and risk of innovation in a more balanced manner. So to conclude, next please, I would like to finalize and just leave you with this question: how can we further expand the frontiers of inclusive innovation? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kuso. Well, it is very much, impressive that UNESCAP is doing very, impressive work on it. Especially, I would like to pick up that, instead of, expanding frontier innovation, we need to extend frontiers of inclusive innovation. Well, I think this is the matter of directionality of our efforts toward science, technology, innovation. And also, it should be extended into business sector as well. Probably we should not stop in inclusive innovation, but it should be extended into inclusive business. It is a quite important message, I guess. Well, now let me turn to our two distinguished panelists who are in place here. So the first panelist is Park Hwan-il, Chief Director of the Division of Global Innovation Strategy at STEPI. He studied in Korea University and University of Wisconsin Medicine. Before joining STEPI, he has had various careers and positions, including Green Technology Center and Prime Minister's Office. You have a floor.
Thank you, Chair, for very kind introduction. I'm so excited to be in this panel discussion today with these distinguished experts. It's very good opportunity for me to learn what issues are being discussed and which direction that the international organization is heading for now to build the resilient and sustainable system. And in particular, both speakers explain their unique experience and lessons from various research and projects conducted in the OECD and UNESCAP. Mr. Mario Cervantes explained the benefit of the global cooperation in knowledge creation in terms of quantitative and qualitative aspect. And he also pointed out that the importance of application of knowledge to the local and global challenges. And one thing that I think is very important issue that Mario said, the global society create many knowledge and issues, and how to distribute and share the outcome and benefit of the research activity and cooperation to globally equally. That's very important issues. And you also mentioned some rising issues in the process of global cooperation, such as research integrity, security, and openness, data management, etc. And Ms. Marta Perez-Cuso, in your presentation, I'm so touched about by the your fundamental questions, like the why we need STI, and as well why we need the inclusive innovation. And you explained many practical and actual cases with Myanmar, Cambodia, Bangladesh, and so on. And you mentioned that it is very important to develop the frontier technology to respond to global challenges, but it is more important to make the innovation be inclusive and just and sustainable. And you also cast a question to us today, how to expand the frontier of inclusive innovation. It is really important but hard to answer at this moment, but I guess it is a long-term task for us to study and develop later. Okay, and so both speakers emphasized the global society should move toward more inclusive and sustainable way. I totally agree with that. And also in the process of creation of knowledge and application of the knowledge and development of more efficient and useful way in R&D is very important issue for us to discuss. And also you suggest many paths or ideas to develop the global cooperation, to enforce the global cooperation in the future. Based on the insight and perspectives from those two both presenters, I would like to add some take regarding the role of global cooperation in STI to build resilient and sustainable system. I would like reference recent paper published by McKinsey several months ago. We have three grand goals that the global society should accomplish together. That is inclusion, sustainability, and growth. These three goals are very closely connected and interconnected, and they are dynamic. And I think they form some virtuous circle each other. So one goal affects the other. One goal reinforces the other. And otherwise, we have to look at the other side of the interaction. I mean, one goal can affect the other goal counter way. I mean, there is some counteracting forces. So I would like briefly explain the relations of those three and why we need global cooperation to accomplish those three goals. Without growth, how we achieve the prosperity and well-being or pay for the transitions needed to make the economy and environment more sustainable and inclusive. Without inclusion, I mean the inclusion means the opportunity for productive work and life satisfaction for all citizens. How will we ensure the demand that propels growth? Without sustainability, how can you have a long-term view on growth for our generation and the next? Okay, let's look at those relations. I start with the growth. Growth support the inclusion in several ways. First, growth create meaningful jobs, and it contribute to increasing the incomes. And also growth correct labor market bias by governmental transfers or tax policies. Also, growth enables sustainability by encouraging the huge investment. As a result, the greater inclusion and sustainability promote growth through new demand and investment opportunities. And sustainability also reinforces both inclusion and growth through the green transitions. I mean, to combat the climate change. So the green transition can contribute to lower many environmental costs. Also, it increased the benefit to the human being. But we have to look at the other side at this moment. Growth affects inclusion through skill-biased inequality, and its magnitude is set to rise with the trend accelerated by the COVID-19. Since the COVID-19, the gap between the developed country and developing country, and some generations or some class, I mean the income levels, there are many gaps widen because of the COVID-19, and the growth can affect the side effect in the case of the COVID-19 pandemic. And also the growth counteract sustainability through a great consumption of resources. And sustainability costs a huge amount of investment, which is a burden to the government, business, and the households. And if policy and measures for inclusion is not properly implemented, the unintended consequences will be happened, such as a distortion of market, a reduction of investment, and faster environmental damage. So these are the positive part and negative part of the three goals. I mean, the inclusion, sustainability, and growth. But the role of STI cooperation, global cooperation, is to maximize the benefit of the virtuous circle of three goals, and as well, it minimizes the bad side, negative side of the three goals. So that's why I proposed insist the global cooperation in STI is beneficial at this moment. And these three goals belong to many countries' national goals, as well as is the global society's goal. But as you know, some countries have very higher standard or higher level of knowledge and system and economic, but many other countries don't. So there is one purpose of the global cooperation in STI. We need shared experience and knowledge. So that global cooperation can be conducted in many ways, such as the international organizations support. Okay, so the time is not enough. I stop here. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well, okay, thank you so much. It is very much thoughtful discussion. Especially, I would like to pick up your points that the tensions and balance among three values or directions of economic growth and inclusiveness and sustainability. Well, but this we should not forget about the growth aspects, even though we have to, change our directionality of our efforts toward science, technology, innovation. That's quite, agreeable on that. So next, panel. Let me invite next panelist, distinguished Honorable Ambassador Oh Young-ju. She studied in Women's University and UC San Diego. And she started her career at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, taking various positions, including ambassador to the UN. And she is currently president of the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security. Is it correct?
Yes, correct.
Floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for such a kind introduction. Also, let me, join the others in thanking the STEPI for having me here. I'm so delighted to be part of this very important and interesting discussion on the potential of the STI in advancing sustainable development goals, and also the role of international community in unlocking its potentials. So I also would like to express my sincere appreciation to distinguished speakers from the OECD and UNESCO for their excellent and insightful presentations. I think they presented very essential elements and ideas which should be thoroughly reviewed by the international actors to make the post-COVID-19 world more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. Actually, among the points two speakers raised in their presentations, I would like to pay special attention to the importance of the mission-driven approach in utilization of STI for the sustainable development in coming years. Also, the importance of creating the enabling environment which will allow the easy access to the innovative technology advances, in particular in developing countries. I also fully associate myself with the view that implementing the STI strategy tailored to the varying development context and circumstances in each country, particularly in developing country, to make all the development efforts, STI-related efforts more productive and impactful on the ground. Building upon these kind of things, let me briefly share a couple of issues I have in mind with regard to this issue from the international development cooperation angle, actually. The first, the key actors and the stakeholders and the international development cooperation field have been trying very hard to embrace the STI element to the ODA program since 2015. But the more attention and as well as the more action-oriented, result-oriented, the efforts at the global level need to be enhanced in terms of both quantity as well as quality. Our colleague from OECD already mentioned that only 5% of the global ODA go to the STI-related program. It cannot be sufficient to maximize the STI potentials for advancing SDGs. Also, even when the successful cooperation, international cooperation delivered to the developing countries to develop some sort of the technology in research, but it should be noted that the establishing supply chain system, commercializing this kind of technology should be established to yield the practical result on the ground. So the ECOSOC colleague already mentioned that delivering last mile connectivity is very, very important when we design STI program. So having said that, I believe that the very careful, was concrete, well thought out development plan, which can encompass all the technological development process as well as the commercialization cycle, is really fundamental. So the development actors like the Korea and the donors, international organizations, should be very careful when we think about how we can provide our assistance to the developing country. My second point is related to the principle of the harmonization and also the alignment. As you see that this is the very fundamental principle for the effective development cooperation. So these days we see that the increasing number of actors, not only government, but also the enterprises, international organizations, and other stakeholders are increasingly engaged in providing STI-related efforts to the developing countries, which means that they should align their own objectives with the national development goals of the recipient countries to improve effectiveness, as well as since there are many, actors now working on the ground to deliver these STI-related efforts. So the cooperation, harmonization among international providers also should, having some kind of attention from the global actors as well. So this is a harmonization, and the principle of harmonization alignment is the very important principle for the development cooperation. So STI-related program cannot be, the exception to that. That's the third point. And also the second point, my third point is regarding the STI strategy for SDGs. So when the international actors like the donors, Korea and other, or the OECD and ASCA, if the developing countries can develop their own STI strategy to implement SDGs, it will be very easy for us, to engage in effectively, because we can identify their priority very easily, since we all have the different expertise and different kind of resources, instruments, modalities. So it also improves the harmonization among the development actors. So also the SDGs is very complex goals, as we all know that 17 goals, 168 targets. Every goals are interrelated. So that's why, in order to enhance some result, through our, cooperation, I believe that we should pay attention to develop national strategy for SDGs. It should be, well aligned with their own national development plan as well. So may international development cooperation actors, may provide some assistance at the developing countries to develop their own strategy, and that it will be some guidance for international providers as well for promoting international cooperation in this field. In that context, so I would like to stress the importance of some global pilot program, which have been organized by the TFM, Technology Facilitation Mechanism of the United Nations. This program, assisting the six and seven countries developing their own national strategy for SDGs. So I hope that we can share some outcome and result, so it can be well utilized, for the better cooperation among the international development actors. Okay, so thank you very much. I will stop here.
Thank you so much. In fact, she was very much, concerned about she was not the expert in this area, but our intention was to bring the diplomatic perspective on this issue, because international cooperation needs diplomatic actions and engagement. So, in that sense, your points are very much, relevant and very much, added value to this discussion. Thank you so much. Well, we are already running out of time, but since we started a little bit late, let me buy the 5 more minutes, okay? The second round, which is that, including the questions that I raised in front, which is that, what's the current geographical complex background and effects on our global collaboration, and another one is what's the right, action of the science diplomacy, and third one is let me recall, is how to effectively engage developing countries. So during this discussions, and I will give you just 1 or 2 minutes to each of you to address any of them, any of questions or questions raised by panelists, you can address very shortly. Okay, let me give you a floor to Mario. Unmute, please. Okay, you're good.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Zhang. I think we have to separate the geopolitical implications from the big powers that are affecting the triad, the cooperation between U.S., China, and the rest of Asia, from the implications for countries that are still developing their own basic STI policies and strategies. So I think one is for the advanced countries, there's a need to de-escalate some of these pressures by having greater communication between the foreign ministries, the research ministries, and the actors involved, the scientists, along with the economic ministries. Because I think it's a policy that affects those 3 areas, the foreign relations, but also the national economic development and the science agendas of the ministries. So there's a need to sort of have a dialogue, because if foreign policy is made only by one party, it could be to the detriment of the scientific community, which wishes to maintain scientific cooperation as an open enterprise, but it needs rules. It needs rules, whether it's common norms, common understanding. And then on the diplomacy, I think there's a need also to use the science diplomacy to increase that capacity in developing countries to engage in international cooperation. So those are my 2 points, is to separate the geopolitical from the advanced country tensions and to increase the diplomacy towards the capacity in the global south. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Okay, what about the Martha? Your last, discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yang. I would like just to make quickly 3 points where I think where there are opportunities. I would like to focus on opportunities. For us, we have experienced and we see very clearly that there's a great deal of opportunities in South-South collaboration on STI policy because of sometimes because of political desire to collaborate with neighboring countries, but more importantly because of similarities, cultural similarities, economic similarities, proximity. It makes a lot of sense to support South-South collaboration. And we are starting to see some middle-income countries that are now starting to cooperate and develop programs for South-South collaboration with neighboring countries. The second part is, I think there are more opportunities to support countries that are further behind. There is a lot of interest to support middle-income countries, but the international community, I think, they're still far behind in supporting less developed countries and other countries in special situations. And that requires financial resources because it will be difficult to build their scientific, technological, and innovation capabilities without efforts in financing and supporting education, technology transfer, and building innovation capabilities. And I think that the third is that there the opportunities are greater when there is long-term engagement and patient engagement in international collaboration. And supporting countries to build their STI capabilities, it's a long-term engagement. Supporting countries to build their STI policymaking knowledge, it's a long-term engagement. And we, so I think it really can make greater difference to support over longer programs of support rather than short-term support programs. And that it's important that those support programs are very pragmatic and are designed in a way that matches the existing current capabilities of the country. So for those are three areas of opportunity for enhancing international collaboration in SDG. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Well, very much clear points. Okay, let me turn to Dr. Park. Do you have any additional points?
Well, I may touch the question 1 and 2 together, science diplomacy. Even though I'm an economist, I'm so glad that this time we are living in times of science, technology, and innovation at this moment. And the STI is mentioned in every sectors and every policies, domestically and internationally and globally, whatever. So why the importance of the STI is increasing? Because the technology and economy and security, they all combined and they converge together. So that's why the science and diplomacy is important now. And one suggestion I can make is that we need let many people to know the importance and the contribution of science diplomacy at this time. So we can study more about the science diplomacy in various ways, and also we can disseminate the benefit of science diplomacy and some method to increase the global cooperation. Okay, thank you.
Great. Great. One other, very clear points. Okay, the last but not least, Ambassador O.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. Given the time constraint, I will follow your guidance faithfully. So I will pick up the second question. So I will be brief. Actually, science diplomacy, also technology diplomacy, is becoming a buzzword right now, and also it become an integral part of the national foreign policy in many countries, including Korea. And so what should be priorities for when we pursue science diplomacy? So I wanted to pick up some points raised by our colleagues, Mr. Cervantes, in his presentation. So we need to facilitate the global discussions as soon as possible to improve the international scientific cooperation through standard settings, as well as the international soft law instruments. By doing so, I believe that we can create some environment in which we promote some healthy competition among the stakeholders, and as well as encourage some cooperation for the global public good, as we have witnessed in COVID-19 era. Thank you. I will stop here.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, well, since we already, out of time, it is not appropriate to summarize all these discussions. Rather than, I would like to pick up just, a few, points. Well, through this session, we just affirmed that global collaboration is very much needed and important for advancing our science, technology, innovation. And another one is that we need to bring developing countries in collaborating this one. And another one is the balance between national interest and global public good concept values together. And also the science diplomacy and need to be, play more active role in that. Lastly, international collaboration, international organizations like OECD and UN should be playing much better and improved role in bringing this global STI. So let me wrap it up, and thank you so much for two distinguished speakers, two distinguished panelists, and everyone attended on this session and online. Thank you so much, and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jang, and thanks again to our amazing speakers and panelists for sharing your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time to announce the end of the 2021 STEPI Global Symposium. On behalf of STEPI, I once again appreciate such fruitful discussion facilitated by our distinguished chairs and speakers today. I would also like to extend my gratitude to all of our participants who have joined us both virtually and in person. Thank you very much for your support and hope you stay safe. Thank you.